Hello and welcome back to this mini-series that aims to help you plan your first TGO challenge. In this episode I'm going to have a look at the thorny issue of crossing open and featureless land. Now this I know is a concern to many first-timers and also to those of you who are from other areas of the world, maybe the USA, where you're more used to walking on waymarked trails. I know for some of our American visitors that I've met, the challenge of crossing open land, the navigational challenge, is one of the attractions to the event. So how do we do that in a way that keeps ourselves safe? Now there's a lot we can do in planning before we even get into the hills itself. So I'm going to share with you 3 or 4 real life scenarios from the challenge. And I'm also going to share with you a couple of mistakes that I made. So you can see how easy it is to lose track of where you are and to become too complacent. One of the great things Scotland has going for it, even if you're walking across very featureless land, is it has a lot of water, and water runs downhill. So we're going to use water and water courses as our main navigational aid, because even when the mist rolls in and visibility falls, the streams and the rivers are still running in the same direction. So I'm going to start off by looking at a little snippet from my first challenge, which I referred to in the last video. So that started from Mallaig here. And as I said, most challengers cross to Little Inverie here and then walk across the hills to Sowleys Bay here. So here's Sowleys Bay. Here's our track running along here. And I ended up camping in Glen Mazzara here. The next day I took this little bridge here and crossed this land here to Glen Mazzara. And then if I scroll across again, I took this track down here and I was heading for the Kingie here. Now let's just scroll back. There it is, Glen Kingie. Now this glen features in hill tracks that I mentioned last time. So this is one of the hill track routes, and there's a really good description of Kingie and the hazards and obstacles that you might have to tackle. So you can aim for the Kinbrae Bothy, which a lot of people stay at. And you can do that by taking this track here that runs up through that pass and around. Or you can take this track here, which just heads up and down through this path. I took this route here. Now, I seem to remember that this track up wasn't as well defined as it is on the map. And that's not uncommon in Scotland. Although there's a track there, it might just be a track through grass. And May is still relatively early in the season. It may just be that it's not very well defined. This track here, of course, is, and the double legend here means it's a Land Rover track. But this track, I don't remember being that well defined, but it doesn't really matter. Because we left here just past this little house and farm here. And this track follows the west bank of this little stream here, and it climbs all the way up to the top of the mini watershed, and then the stream runs out, and then coming down we pick the stream up here. Now the track runs off around the side of these crags here to Kinbrae, and the stream runs down there, but the point is that's the defining point we're looking for, where that next stream down starts. And in reality, we've only got this little bit of land to navigate. So even if the mist comes in, we're walking through a valley, we've got crags on either side of us, and we're just basically heading in that direction. You might take a compass reading if you want to, but it's difficult to get lost. But we're just looking for that watercourse, really, there. Now, while I'm on this, I'll take the opportunity to just think of another feature about water. So a lot of challengers stay at Kinbrae, and the next day they will cross the Kingie here and take this path that climbs up to the main path. Now you'll see that path runs quite high above this ground here. So this is quite boggy lowland, but it floods as well. So crossing here is not a problem normally, but when the river is in spades, it can be a major hazard. And I've heard of some pretty hairy river crossings there. If you look up the Kingean hill tracks, this obstacle is described, I seem to remember. So the obvious answer to that is to just walk uphill a little bit. And here you'll see that the stream is a stream and it's going to be much easier to cross. So if you're stuck here, the rivers are really bad and you're worried about it, don't feel you have to do a heroic crossing. Just take this track back and look at a point further upstream. And that runs for any stream that you see, really. On my walk, I just actually didn't go to Kimbrake, so I just followed this stream down, hopped over these little watercourses and climbed up to the track. So there we are. We're simply climbing up here, following the water, walking along the top, and then following the water down. Let's move on now and look at a second example. This is also from the challenge, and this is, if I just zoom out a bit, you'll see this here is the Ravine Door, which is a rather beautiful river system and valley. This here is the River Dolnain, another major feature, and we want to cross from one to the other. So, zooming in a bit, this is the route that we chose. So we crossed this bridge here, skirted this piece of woodland, crossed over here, which is quite straightforward, and took this track up into the hills. Here we go, following it around. And then we took this system here, which is trackless, up here to the top. Now, the great thing about water as it runs through these kind of hills, it's running through peat. So even as the stream gets smaller and smaller and it fades from view, you can still see the line of the stream in the peat. So we get to this point here. And we're aiming for this little Bothian track here. So the idea is we cross the bridge here and then walk along the north bank to this area here, which is what we're aiming for. But it does mean we've got to cross open land here. This is the route, and it's probably just a couple of kilometres. But if I just take that out for the moment, and let's just look at the landscape, you'll see that this is what we're looking for. So we're crossing this bit of open land. There's a slight rise here that we can skirt. But as we begin to descend, this system becomes quite obvious because it's a stream that very quickly cuts its way through the peat. And this is a lovely walk downhill. As we begin to descend, the river system opens up and we can kind of see where we are. But all the time, we're just following this stream down here. If we just verge off a little, we're picking the stream up here rather than here. It doesn't matter so much. We're then just heading downhill. So we've probably got a kilometre or so of walking across the peat hags or the open peat at the top. And I remember that as being a great day's walk. Some of these overland stretches are fabulous walking. Now, I did say we made some mistakes. So the first time that I came here, let me just scroll back. I camped along here somewhere, and I met a young guy camping at the same spot and who was going the same way as me. So the next day we set off together and we banged down here and we took the route that I showed you there. A few years later, I was in the same place, camping in the same place, and there was this same guy. And we had 3 or 4 people with us. On the next day, because we'd done it before, the 2 of us, we banged on ahead and started this climb here, and then we got lost. We took the wrong route up. We took this stream here, and I think I'm right in saying we couldn't easily see that track. So we took this stream up here, and it seemed about right, and we kept going, and we kept going, and we kept going. And we kept going, and we kept going, and we went up here, and we ended up here to the west of Carndub. And then as we started to descend, we picked up this track. So we descended to this track, I think, here. Now, the first problem we had is that if you look, there's no track alongside the dull lane here. This is actually quite hard territory. So we ended up walking in this direction here. And this was a real tough heather slog. It doesn't look very much on the map, but it really was hard work. And by the time we got here, one of our party was quite exhausted. So we took him into the bothy, lit a fire, and then several of us kept going to our original destination. But it was a much bigger day than it should have been, and actually quite exhausting. And we were quite lucky that bothy was where it was. Now, how would we have avoided that? Well, the simple thing to do is to just count, really. So it's quite obvious when you're on this stretch here. So there's one river system here, coming in, a stream cutting deep through the rocks. It's a very discernible feature. There's the second one, which is the mistake we took, very discernible. And here's the third one. So really, if we hadn't been nattering and being so complacent, we would have simply just been counting. We would have known that was the third river system as we came up here. And we'd have also known not to carry on this trip. As the stream bends round here in quite a profound way, this looks a major route, and it kind of lures you in. But because we've been counting the valleys, we know that this is the one we need to go on. There's not a track up here yet, but there might well be now. This map's a few years old. This feature here, this tarn, I think had dried up the last time I was here, but it didn't matter because we were just following that watercourse through to the finish. We could have walked this way or picked up this stream here, which joins that watercourse. Doesn't matter. We know every route we go is basically heading to that major bit of water dropping down there. So, 1, 2, 3, and that's the one we take. So there we go. That's us using water to navigate across those high hills. Let's move on and look at a second one. Let me just take that route out for you. So this is also in the Monolea. And climb, let's just magnify a little bit. So the route here climbs up from Dunmaglass Lodge, and then this track starts to climb quite steeply as we move into the hills, and ends at this little hut here. Now this hut is a hut that's been put there for shooting parties, but it's left open during the challenge, which is quite a common feature. You'll often find that the gillies will leave these sheds open so that you can take shelter in them if you need to. Life is made a little bit more complicated now because the last time I was here, heavy vehicles had driven up this track a little bit, and I don't know, it was just a bulldozed track through the across the open ground. I'm not sure yet whether that's been made into a stone track or not yet. But what we're trying to do is, from this point, we want to connect here, which is Glen Mazzara. If I move over, this is a lovely little glen and a great experience. So we want to connect the two. So how do we do that, given that we've got all this open land here? Well, the first thing that we do is to follow this stream up again. And we're aiming for this ridge that runs here. It goes from Carn Odar, the second Carn, and the third Carn Al Chul there. So we're heading this up. Now, I mentioned that track, and we really have to be careful of these tracks in the Highlands because this one verges off and goes down here. when you see a new track, there's a tremendous temptation to take it. And you might think it's heading in the right direction. And then you get, you climb up for a bit and then you realise it's heading in the wrong direction. So if you don't know the track and it's not marked on your map, then stick to your route, stick to your stream. And if you're lucky, you can find that the track cuts in and out of the hills and you can see where it's going. But don't be tempted. So we're following this stream up here to get to a point on this ridge. So we've got the hill there, that's easy to see. So we're aiming for here somewhere. Then we get here, we're just walking along the top of this ridge. So again, it's a watershed, so there's no water at the top of it, other than standing water in a few little pools. There's actually a broken down fence line as well here. But basically we're just walking along to this top here. And then from that top, 800 metres, we're navigating to this next bit on the ridge. So this is a continued watershed ridge, if you like. At this point, we need to move down to here. So all we're doing is we're heading for one of these watercourses moving downhill. And I seem to remember this is pretty well defined. So I just drop down here to the east, pick up this watercourse, followed it down to meet the track. And then off we go down to Glen Mazzara. So again, we're using the water there to navigate. Following that stream up, hitting the ridge and following the ridge along the watershed. And we know it's the watershed because there are no streams. Until we get to this point here, and then we can drop down here or there straight into Glen Mazzara and the Glen Mazzara track. One final little example I'll show you, which always makes me smile, really. This is a very familiar bit of a walk in the last stretch of the challenge. So leaving Braemar, skirting the Balmoral Estate, you can skirt the side of Lochnagar or come over Lochnagar Mountain. And a lot of people, particularly common on the Chigio challenge, take this track up here and they're aiming for this bothy here, the Sheelan and Mark and campsite. And then crossing this open ground, we pick up here this track down to the stables of Lee and Glen Lee down to open ground, which is really the end of the big mountain. So following this track up, when we get here, when the track starts to peter out, there's this stretch here of peat hags that have to be crossed. And if your navigation isn't the finest or your compass work isn't the finest, it's quite easy to overshoot the Sheelan and Mark and to end up travelling in this direction here. And then you can miss it. So sometimes you only see it when you're getting back this way. So it's easy to miss that stretch there on the peat hag. However, there is a simpler way of doing it, and that's to follow the water. So if we follow this track up here, we get to a point where the track divides in a kind of Y formation. There. See, there's no track moving up here. And we want to take this track here that turns off to the south. Although it goes to the south, got this. It's moving round this slight high ground here. And then although it peters up here, we've got high ground to our left, which we just skirt. And as we just come around this high ground here, so it's just a matter of meters, we start to pick up this stream that's running in, which the Sheelan and Mark is sighted again. So that's the hassle-free way of doing it. You can bang across these peat hags if you like and hope you hit the right line or whatever. But a simple way to do it is to follow the water. Get to that point, take the right-hand stream, and then literally you've just got a few hundred yards of not seeing anything before you hit that height and you can see this stream rolling round here. So there you go, as another piece of water for you. So navigating across open land is not quite as bad as it looks. providing you're really planning for the watercourse. Now, one of the reasons I mention this is because when you pick up your challenge for the first time, your challenge entry the first time, and we are at the point, as I write, when people are finding out whether they've been successful or not, you can rush out and do what I did. And I rushed out and bought a whole load of maps, and I opened them up. And this wasn't the error, so it was something I realised there actually wasn't much there. And you think, oh, this is big country. But looking at the water systems, the lakes, the lochs and the rivers, we can break that down into something that's memorable, that we can plot a route against, and that will by and large keep us safe, all on the premise that water runs downhill. So there are some thoughts about navigating across open land, using water as our most secure permanent feature. In the next video, we'll move on again and we'll look at another aspect of route planning.